Public hearing scheduled for 6:30. Call to order. Clerk, call the roll.
Mrs. Brown? Dr. Estrop?
Here.
Mrs. Houston?
Here.
Mrs. Tackett?
Here.
Mr. Rue?
Here. Has proper legal notice been given for this hearing?
Notice of a public hearing to consider the budget for the calendar year 2026 was published in the Springfield News-Sun, a newspaper of general circulation within the city on November 27, 2025. Attached hereto is a true and correct copy of such legal notice.
I move that the communication be ordered received, recorded in the minutes, and filed.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Clerk, call the roll.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mrs. Houston?
Yes.
Mrs. Tackett?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes. Staff report.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight I'll be providing a high-level overview of the 2026 budget, and I'm Katie Evanston. I'm the city's finance director. So let me begin by briefly explaining how we arrived at this point in presenting the budget. Our budget process officially begins in April of each year with our tax budget, and that's essentially our revenue forecast for the upcoming year that's certified to the county and limits the appropriations or the budget that is before you tonight in a first reading for the appropriation ordinance for expenditures. Departments then submit their 2026 budget or expenditure request in late August. And in early September, our leadership team, which consists of department leaders, meet to evaluate priorities across the organization. Throughout October, we held additional meetings with individual departments and department heads to further refine those priorities and address areas where right sizing and operational adjustments were necessary. From there, the city manager and members of the finance department worked extensively to develop the 2026 city manager's preliminary budget. City charter requires us to have that budget on file by November 1st of each year. We shared the full document with the commissioners during 2 in-depth evening work sessions in mid-November. Both meetings were open to the public and no changes were made to the budget during that review period. This year's process was especially challenging. It required difficult conversations, collaboration across departments, and continued work to communicate openly and build shared understanding across the organization and the community with a focus on operating as efficiently as possible. Some decisions directly affected people, and our focus remained on doing what was necessary to preserve core services and long-term fiscal stability. Even with those challenges, we were able to deliver a balanced budget for 2026. Before we dive into the details, I want to take a moment to thank city staff, many of whom are in this room, for their continued dedication throughout this process and in the year ahead as we navigate the fiscal reality that we are in. Looking ahead at general fund revenues, so general fund supports most of our day-to-day services. So that includes public safety, engineering, community and economic development, parks and administration, to name a few. For 2026, general fund revenues are projected at about $61.3 million, an increase of roughly $5.7 million from the revised 2025 budget. I want to be clear up front. Most of that increase is the result of a one-time timing shift from our transition to RETA, which is the Regional Income Tax Agency, for the collection of our income tax revenue. The city records income tax revenue when it is received. When we were handling collections internally, December revenue arrived in December. With RETA, monthly revenue is remitted on the first day of the following month. So December 2025 revenue will be recorded in January of 2026. That means the 2025 budget reflects 11 months of income tax revenue, while 2026 reflects the full 12. This timing change is the only reason the year-over-year income tax numbers appear higher. It is not new growth and will not repeat. The general fund continues to face significant pressure. We began the budget process with a projected $6.9 million deficit for 2026 with requested budget. Through targeted operational efficiencies, the voluntary separation incentive program, and reductions in funds historically supported by the general fund, such as the Permanent Improvement Fund, the Parking Fund, the Airport Fund, we were able to bring the budget into balance. We also offset VSEP, or the Voluntary Separation Incentive Program, and retirement costs using the Accrued Benefit Liability Fund. That is a fund that over the last decade, we have transferred some excess revenues from the general fund to offset larger retirement payouts. These actions help stabilize the general fund, but they are largely one-time solutions as we deplete those other funds. We are budgeting a cautious 2% increase in 2026 for income tax. To date, 2025 has trended declining or flat compared to 2024. And I'll talk more about that in the closing slide. So this slide illustrates the various revenue sources that make up the general fund. As you can see, the largest portion is income tax, which remains critical to funding the city's operations and core services. Especially in light of state level funding reductions and potential federal reductions, income tax revenue becomes even more important. The local government fund and state shared taxes make up 4% of general fund revenue. While we're projecting a slight increase totaling $75,000, it's important to note that just over a decade ago, this revenue source, the local government fund, when combined with the estate tax, totaled $5 million and equaled roughly 10% of the city's general fund revenues versus the 4% that we're seeing today. The changes at the state level have significantly increased our reliance on income tax revenue. Services and charges account for 3% of revenue. This includes fees collected for contractor applications, building permits, and inspections. Fines and forfeitures make up 3% and include various fines and court costs. Finally, all other revenue sources comprise 13%. This includes hotel and motel taxes, intergovernmental agreements, such as those with Clark State and Springfield City Schools for the police division, interest earnings, reimbursements, most notably $3 million for administrative overhead charged to other funds. And this includes funds like HUD, our Community Development Block Grant funds, where we're able to reimburse general fund salaries. In addition, as I mentioned, we're reducing cash balances in other funds, so transfers are also reflected in this other revenue sources, which brings down that percentage of revenue of income tax in the general fund, where that's typically over 80%. That would still be the case for 2026. It's that we're transferring additional revenues into the general fund from other funds, $1.2 million from the Permanent Improvement Fund as an example. It's lowering that percentage a bit and just highlighting that that's a one-time revenue going into the general fund. So that reliance on income tax, while the 77% is lower than prior years, that's not actually reflective of how reliant we are on income tax. That burden continues to increase. General fund expenditures for 2026 are projected at roughly $61.2 million. This includes personnel, operating cost, contract, and plan transfers to other funds, such as the Fire Service Enhancement Fund. Again, when we began this budget cycle, the 2026 requested budget showed an operational deficit of $6.9 million. Again, through programs like VSEP, targeted operational efficiencies, and strategic adjustments across departments and supported funds, we were able to close that gap. As a result, we are presenting a balanced general fund budget with an $88,000 surplus in 2026. From the 2025 original budget to the 2026 preliminary budget, I think it's important to highlight that personnel costs in the general fund were reduced by more than $2.3 million. And I'll speak to that in a little bit more detail on the upcoming staffing slide as far as number of FTEs. Throughout this process, our focus has remained on making decisions that are fiscally responsible, sustainable over the long term, and centered on protecting the city's core services for our residents. This slide shows the general fund reserves we are projecting at the end of 2025 and 2026 based on the budget as presented. The Auditor of State requires that we maintain reserves equal to 1 month of expenditures, or 8.3%. By the end of 2025, we are projecting reserves of $5.6 million, or 9.5%. By the end of 2026, we see a slight decrease in that number to 9.3%. While this is just below the City Commission's goal of maintaining at least 10%, we know that close monitoring of state and federal impacts, income tax revenue trends as we move into 2026, and other economic conditions will continue to be essential as we move into the year ahead and face the likelihood of additional reduction. Maintaining healthy reserves is critical because it gives us the flexibility to respond to financial pressures when they arise, and help ensure the city's long-term financial stability, especially given our heavy reliance on income tax revenue. Looking at operations and staffing, so the 2026 budget, as I stated, reflects several important staffing considerations as we work to align operations with our available revenues, while continuing to protect the city's core services. So citywide staffing overall is reduced from 595 full-time positions that were reflected in the 2025 budget to 568. Within the general fund, staffing decreases from 2025 to 2026 is 288 to 261.5. These adjustments are driven by the Voluntary Separation Incentive Program, strategic restructuring, and targeted operational efficiencies, not across-the-board reductions. This also reflects the city's transition to RETA for income tax collection, which saved us over $500,000 in staffing costs with that transition and achieving economies of scale with RETA. From the 2025 original budget to the 2026 preliminary budget, again, want to highlight that we reduced personnel cost by $2.3 million. Even with these reductions, police and fire both remain authorized at 130 personnel each, which is above the charter minimum staffing levels. This ensures we maintain strong public safety coverage while still managing long-term financial stability. Overall, this staffing plan reflects a balanced approach, supporting fair wages and benefits, operating efficiently, and ensuring the organization is right-sized for the revenues available. This slide highlights the Permanent Improvement Fund, which supports capital improvements that are typically not funded by the water or sewer funds or our enterprise funds. 10% of every income tax dollar is allocated to this fund, with 90% being allocated to the general fund. In prior years, we were able to transfer additional general fund dollars to support more capital projects out of this fund. However, we are not able to do that in 2026 with the status of the general fund. For 2026, revenues in the Permanent Improvement Fund are projected at $5.8 million, with $5.3 million coming directly from income tax. For 2026, expenditures focus on the most critical needs. This includes our commitment to Neighborhood Street Paving Program of $2 million in 2026, and $500,000 for our Sidewalk Curb and Gutter Program, which is the planning ahead of the 2027 Neighborhood Street Paving Program. Key public safety investments include 2 new police cruisers, refurbishment of a medic unit, fire gear replacement, and ballistic vests for police. And just highlighting there, like with a project like the ballistic vests, that's one where we also pursue state grant dollars in order to stretch our resources further. Of note, departments submitted $8.4 million in project requests, which underscores both the level of need and the limits of the available funding that we have in the Permanent Improvement Fund. So for 2026, project-related expenditures are budgeted at $5.6 million. So we're keeping in line with the revenue that's coming into that fund for the project that we are funding in 2026. To help offset the community's significant capital needs, over the past 3 years, the city has strategically leveraged more than $20 million in American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds for public safety investment. This approach allowed us to address high-priority infrastructure and equipment needs without placing additional strain on local revenues like our Permanent Improvement Fund. This slide highlights the city's efforts to address the financial and regulatory changes within our utility funds. So for the sewer fund, we continue to manage substantial debt service obligations tied to the U.S. EPA's Combined Sewer Overflow, or CSO, mandate. This includes approximately $60 million for the High Rate Clarifier, or treatment plant, and $23 million for the Erie Express Sewer. To support these required investment, the City Commission has legislated 1% annual sewer rate increases that occurred in both 2025 and will take effect on January 1, 2026. The Water Fund is also undergoing necessary adjustments to maintain financial stability and meet regulatory requirements. The Commission legislated 12% rate increases in 2025 and then again on January 1, 2026 to sustain operations and ongoing capital needs. I fully expect that we will come back in 2026 with additional rate increases for future years beyond 2026. Looking ahead, both funds face the potential for additional unfunded mandates, such as required lead water service line replacements and long-term control plan requirements that could significantly impact future costs and the cost to our residents. These emerging regulatory challenges underscore the importance of maintaining stable funding to ensure continued compliance, reliability, and affordable service for all residents. In closing and looking ahead, across the country, municipal budgets are shifting from a period of rebound to one of restraint. Revenue growth is slowing or declining. Inflation and procurement costs continue to rise, and the federal supports that help stabilize city budget post-COVID, especially the American Rescue Plan Act, are winding down. We've already taken significant steps to reduce costs and right-size operations. So Springfield specifically is already feeling these pressures due to our reliance on income tax revenue. Public safety remains the largest share of our general fund budget, and the cost for wages, benefits, construction, and materials across the board continue to increase. Looking ahead, we face unfunded mandates, large infrastructure needs that exceed available funding, tariff impacts on procurement, and uncertainty around both federal, state, and local revenue, like the HUD funding that I mentioned and property tax. And for Springfield specifically, again, our heavy reliance on income tax makes us more sensitive to the long-term impact of remote work, net profit volatility, and broader economic shifts. These challenges reinforce the need for disciplined planning, healthy reserves, and cautious spending as we move into 2026. This budget also highlights our commitment to fiscal responsibility, operational excellence, and service, positioning us to remain stable, resilient, and ready for what comes next. And with that, I'll take your question.
Thank you. Katie, I want to thank you and your team for the hard work it takes to squeeze this together and make it understandable and precise for our community. So just appreciate all the effort you've put together, and thank you for your detailed explanation. I just think it's something to remember, the amount of unfunded mandates. For example, when she brought up water sewer, the EPA mandates, we have to do those rate increases to be able to cover those. And those are things that we find out about as a city, and we have to make the community known, and then we have to make an adjustment in our rates. It's just something that we have to continue to do. So, other comments from commissioners? Restrop?
I want to commend and thank all of the staff members who were involved in putting this budget together. For us to present to this community a balanced budget in these times, frankly, is unheard of. Perhaps our friends and colleagues at the federal level should take note. Balanced budgets are possible. I also want to point out that with our new software, we can continue to monitor expenditures throughout the year, which should help our new commissioners as they take their seats here. We can also monitor revenues. And I hope we've been overly conservative in our revenue projections. Probably not, but I'm hopeful that we were overly conservative and that revenues will pick up over the course of 26. But we now have the tools in our finance department to determine where we are and where we can go. And I think those are critical tools to have for appropriate decision-making. So again, Katie, to you, Brian, to you, all the other staff members involved in this, and my congratulations on bringing before us tonight a balanced budget. Thank you.
Commissioner?
There's no doubt the choice of the state to retain more funds at the top have a large impact on the ability for local government to operate. I hope we continue to inform our state reps on the increased challenges we face due to this. It's local government. Right here is where the rubber meets the road, and we feel the impact firsthand as we try to move forward and do our best for our citizens here in Springfield. Thank you.
Comment? Katie, this is available on our website, correct?
It will be available on our website by the end of the week.
Entire presentation.
The entire presentation,
Great.
along with the full PDF of the 2026 preliminary budget.
Excellent, thank you. Are there comments from the audience on this hearing?
Mike Lowe. The city charter said we were supposed to have so many police officers and fire department. I think it's 130, and we have not met those requirements for quite some time. We have 5 officers leaving this month for retirement. So how many police officers and fire department do we actually have?
I believe currently on fire, we sit at 123, and on police, we're at 122. We are authorized, the budget authorizes the 130. The charter minimums are police at 124. We were just at that recently. We just did another test and hope to have those positions filled after the first of the year. And then on the fire side, the charter minimum is 127. And we actually are authorized above that. Like Katie referred to, on both with police and fire, we're authorized at 130 for both police and fire. And we just ran a test as well on the fire side and are working through the process. And they would be hired in after the first of the year and start the academy, I believe, January 26th.
So all these years, we've been paying for the police and fire from that charter, but we've never met the requirements, and you're taking our money.
I would just have to say that's an incorrect statement to say we have never met the charter minimums, because
It's been
we
a
have.
long time, hasn't it?
No, we were just at the charter minimums. Again, charter minimums 124. We just dropped below that maybe a month and a half ago. And on fire, we just dropped a couple months ago as well.
And I would like to have copies of that.
Certainly, I can provide that to you.
A motion to conclude this hearing?
So moved.
It's been moved.
Second.
Go ahead just a minute. Mr. Exroth?
Yeah, it kind of sounded like you were leading up to probably increasing taxes. Is that what I'm hearing? Saying you have to make up for these things? Should we be prepared for some kind of increase?
No, that would require an actual ballot initiative and the vote of residents to approve an additional income tax levy. When we talk about income tax revenues, the projection that I mentioned was a 2% increase for 2026, and that's just reflective of expecting wages and things like that to go up in the community to where we receive 2% more than what we've received in 2025. And also with that transition to RETA, with greater enforcement of our income tax ordinance to ensure that everyone is paying their fair share, or the 2.4% if you're a resident or work in the city, that we are collecting all of that revenue. So not reflective of an additional income tax increase on the community.
All right, then one other thing, you had mentioned paving the roads. I think I read somewhere that there had been a 9-year freeze on paving some of the roads.
So from 2009 to 2018, yes, we were not able to implement a neighborhood street paving program. With the passage of the additional 0.4%, one of the commitments of that in 2017 was to restore the neighborhood streets program. And I'm glad to say that since the passage of that, we have far exceeded that $2 million annually and a neighborhood street program.
Okay, so when you got all those ARPA funds, nothing extra was added to that for the paving?
ARPA dollars were specifically precluded us from using them for roadways. Would have loved to
Okay.
use those, but the
Right.
feds precluded us from actually paving roadways.
Okay.
And actually, if it was, you could do utility projects, and they were so specific that you could only pave the portion of the actual pipe, like the linear feet of pipe is all you could replace of roadway. Couldn't do more.
But you could put the money in general funds and use it from general.
Not all of the ARPA monies, no.
Right, but part of the, I think, million you put there could have. Just a question.
Could have certainly used them for roads, but there were other priorities of the community as well. And that's balancing multiple priorities of the community.
And I would just add, certainly at any time, I am happy to have a conversation with anyone, explaining city finances, city budget, how we utilized ARPA dollars. My direct number is 937-324-7619, and my email is keviston@springfieldohio.gov.
And I'll just add real quick on the Commissioner Tackett brought up about the state funding. So if you recall, going back to 2017, when we did pass an increase of 0.4% of the income tax, that was in response to the state cutting local government fund, estate tax, those types of things, that reduction and over-reliance that it was placing on income tax for cities across Ohio. And you saw many cities at that time put out ballot initiatives to increase their income tax. And then what we're seeing today, as Katie indicated in her presentation, is the remote tax change. So, it used to pay based off of where your business was located, not necessarily where you were doing the work. We can talk about that policy all day. That's not the point, but it does have an impact when you're over-reliant on income tax. And then the other piece of it is net profit. So before, businesses could look at a 5-year net operating loss and use it as a 50% reduction to what they paid in net profit. And the state changed that recently to now they can use 100% or deduct 100%. And that has impacted. So we've seen significant reductions in revenues due to remote work changes and net profit. So when the state already put us with an over-reliance on income tax, and then they further impact our ability to collect those revenues, it makes it difficult for municipalities. And this isn't just Springfield. This is happening across the state of Ohio.
Thank you. Or call the roll?
Mrs. Houston?
Yes.
Oh, we need a second
I seconded it.
adjournment. Okay. Mrs. Houston?
Yes.
Dr. Estrop?
Yes.
Mrs. Tackett?
Yes.
Mr. Rue?
Yes.